Good afternoon, dear viewers. It's 6 p.m. here in Cairo. Time for the news, and we start with a look at the major headlines. President Fattah al-Sisi chaired a meeting on promoting the country's industrial sector. Sudan opposition nominates ex-UN economist as the country's prime minister. And the UN Security Council to discuss Kashmir behind closed doors on Friday. President Fattah al-Sisi held talks with Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, the Minister of Trade and Industry, as well as other senior state officials today to follow up the new system for allocating state-owned lands across the country. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Bassam Rodi said during the meeting that President Sisi gave his directives to launch a governmental electronic gate of a unified industrial investment map next September. The meeting also reviewed the national strategic plan and future vision adopted by the country with the aim of upgrading and developing Egypt's industry sector. The President instructed all concerned bodies to remove all obstacles facing businessmen in Egypt. After ending the annual Hajj rituals, pilgrims started arriving home coming from Saudi Arabia. Egypt's national carrier has been operating 5 daily flights from Jeddah Airport to Cairo's International Airport to boarding back home around 900 pilgrims. The Cairo airport received yesterday the first pilgrim return flight from Jeddah. And missiles hit the only functioning airport in the Libyan capital Tripoli today, killing 1 worker. Mitiga Airport said in a statement that traffic was halted and flights were diverted to Misrata, a city some 200 kilometers to the east of Tripoli. The airport has been repeatedly hit since infighting erupted over the capital Tripoli, but there had been rarely casualties. The United Nations had brokered last week a truce accepted by the warring parties, but fighting has continued. And Sudan's main opposition alliance said today it will nominate Abdallah Hamdouk, an economist who has served in international institutions, to be prime minister in the country's transitional government. The development comes after months of political turmoil as negotiations between the Transitional Military Council, which has ruled Sudan since April, and the opposition alliance known as the Forces of Freedom and Change dragged on. A planned new sovereign council must appoint the prime minister based on a nomination from the FFC, according to a constitutional declaration agreed on earlier this month. And the Executive Committee of the Palestine Liberation Organization holds today a consultative meeting on the developments at the occupied Old City of Jerusalem in light of the relevant UN resolutions and accord signed with the Israeli Occupation Authority. The Palestinian presidency has earlier warned of any attempts to change the status quo in Jerusalem, particularly at the premises of Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. It denounced remarks by Israeli Occupation Homeland Security in which it urged changing the historic status of Al-Aqsa, calling on the international community to pile up pressure on the Israeli Occupation Authority to immediately halt such attempts. And Syrian government forces captured today a string of Al-Qaeda affiliate terrorist-held villages in northwest Syria, inching closer to a key town in the Idlib region. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the government loyalists today stood just 3 kilometers away from the key town of Khan Shaykhun after capturing 5 villages to its northwest overnight. The observatory added that fighting in southern Idlib killed 5 security forces and 11 terrorists. Government airstrikes also killed a man in southern Idlib. And the United States applied today to seize an Iranian tanker detained by Gibraltar, halting its expected release at the last minute and preventing a possible swap for a British-flagged tanker held by Iran. The 2 seized tankers have become pawns in the standoff between Iran and the West, with their fate tangled in the diplomatic differences between the EU's big powers and the United States. The Iranian Grace 1 oil tanker was seized by Royal Marine commanders in a landing in darkness off the coast of the British overseas territory on the 4th of July. Gibraltar sources said the tanker was suspected of selling off oil to Syria in breach of European Union sanctions. And in a speech marking India's Independence Day, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi hailed today his path-breaking move to strip Kashmir of its autonomy, as his Pakistani counterpart warned of possible ethnic cleansing. Parts of Kashmir that India controls have been under lockdown since the 4th of August, with freedom of movement restricted and phones and internet cut. Pakistan, meanwhile, observed Black Day in protest over Kashmir move. In a relevant development, the UN Security Council is due to meet behind closed doors on Friday at the request of China and Pakistan to discuss their Indian decision. And China's ambassador to London said today that his country will not sit by and watch and is ready to quell the unrest swiftly if the crisis in Hong Kong becomes uncontrollable. The Chinese ambassador also denounced foreign interference in Hong Kong protests and urged British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government to handle the issue with great caution. In the meantime, Hong Kong braced for more mass demonstrations through the weekend as the airport, one of the world's busiest, was returning to normal but under tight security. And Greece deployed today nearly 400 firefighters to try to put out a massive wildfire on the island of Evia, burning through a pristine pine forest for a third day. Firefighters managed to contain the fire in a ravine near the village of Platana, backed by nearly 100 vehicles, 9 helicopters and 12 planes, including 2 from Italy and 1 from Spain. The wildfire has caused inestimable damage to the local 500-hectare mountain wildfire sanctuary of Agri Litassa. And moving to the financial news, and the Central Agency for Public Mobilization and Statistics announced the unemployment rate declined during the second quarter of the current year to reach 7.5% compared to 8.1% in the first quarter. The CAPMAS added that manpower during the second quarter of the year 2019 exceeded 28 million, up 0.4% compared to the second quarter of the previous year. The International Monetary Fund hailed the remarkable decline in the unemployment rate in 2019, which hits its lowest level since 2011. And Egypt's stock market indices collectively declined during today's dealings, losing some gains achieved yesterday, being affected by selling operations carried out by foreign corporations and Arab investors. The benchmark EGX 30 index fell 1.7% to reach 14,285 points, and the capped EGX 30 index was also down 1.8%. The medium capped index EGX 70 and the more expanded EGX 100 index both edged lower 0.2 and 0.8% respectively. And stock markets slid today after Wall Street suffered its worst showing this year as mounting fears of a possible global recession, so investors flee equities for havens such as bonds. The yen and gold. In Europe, London's benchmark FTSE 100 index dipped 0.1%. Frankfurt's DAX 30 added 0.3%, and the Paris CAC 40 grew 0.5%. Across Asia, Tokyo's key Nikkei index nosedived nearly 2% before recovering slightly to finish 1.2% down. Sydney plummeted nearly 3%, while Singapore shed 1.2%. Hong Kong recovered from early losses, adding 0.8% after opening 1.5% down. Shanghai closed 0.3% higher after shedding 1.7% at the open. And moving to oil prices, which extended a punishing sell-off today as investors fear the historic drop in long-term U.S. bond yields could portend a recession globally. Brent crude lost another 0.6% to $59.12 a barrel after shedding 3% overnight. U.S. crude was lost down 0.4% at $55.03. As for other commodities, safe havens, gold gained 0.3% to $1,520 per ounce, not far from its highest since April 2013.